just jump right in with the content of the day. But yeah, I am a charter member of TIE. I've been associated with TIE for a couple years now. I reside in Southern California, but I'll tell you, every time I have a chance to get up here and meet with the members, it's really an exciting thing. The TIE members are so innovative and so creative, and I know that everybody in the room just has like a ton of knowledge already on the topic. And I guess I'd say that it's kind of nice to have a venue like this because it gives us a chance to really have some dialogue back and forth. So it's a little bit more interactive than just a whole bunch of presentations coming at you. As was mentioned, I'm part of something called the KPMG Lighthouse. I actually started the KPMG Lighthouse about 5 years ago. And people say, well, what is this Lighthouse thing? Well, the Lighthouse is KPMG's center of excellence and our delivery arm related to AI, advanced analytics, and big data infrastructure. And we created it with a separate branding because KPMG was not known for this before. KPMG was known for audit, tax, basically process consulting. So we formed an entirely new group to do this. In the last 5 years, this team has grown from just a handful of people to now over 800 people in the US. So pretty remarkable growth. And I'd like to think it's because of us, but I think it's probably even more so due to the market for what we're providing to clients. Most of our client base is the big enterprise. So we know a lot about big companies. We do work for most of the big financial institutions, healthcare, consumer products, industrial markets, etc. So we kind of have that enterprise level perspective. And aside from that, I've got over 30 years in professional services. So even besides AI, I kind of work with big companies to know what it takes to get something big and get it ingrained. And it's just not a matter of saying, here's something cool, here's the technology, you should want it. There's a lot more to it than that. And we're going to talk a lot more about that today. So it's not just the technology and the foundation, you have to have it. You have to have the data science, but it's all these other things that really make it work in the enterprise. And so we think that that is kind of the practical application of AI. Oops. Need some help here? I might have gone the wrong way. Yeah. And we've seen companies that are more successful at what? Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Are you sure? No. No? So we've seen companies that are more successful at kind of moving up the curve rapidly. And I'm going to talk about a few of those characteristics. What makes companies more successful and less successful? And that's kind of what we refer to as the AI-driven enterprise. So let me start by reflecting on a little bit of history that I'm sure this whole group knows. But if you look at like AI over the past 70 years, a lot of great thought, a couple of winters, more recently an explosion of data that really has made some big improvements possible, and a lot of Moore's Law along the way. What we've seen is this all referred to by the techniques as opposed to what it accomplishes. We talk about machine learning, and we talk about natural language processing and neural nets and deep learning and all these things, which is cool, but that's very technology-centric, and it really isn't business-centric. And we like to think that it's more about the practical application. So start thinking about what it can do versus what it is. Okay. A trend we're seeing currently is something we call the AAA trifecta. And it really is the convergence of classical AI with traditional analytics and automation. And when I say automation, think about RPA or robotic process automation, not necessarily highly sophisticated automation. Companies are bringing these three things together because they don't want to just have something that's kind of cool. They want to have something that they can embed in their organization. And they want to have something that's kind of a little bit more systematic. So what are companies doing now? Where are they? And I'd start by saying that the companies that we deal with, call it Fortune 500, they're all bought into this. And that's different from 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there was a lot of reticence. There were companies that say, oh, this is just a fad, it's going to pass. I think they're all convinced. They're all bought into it now. They're all investing. What we see is maybe not necessarily what we would call sophisticated AI, but it's good advanced analytics, predictive analytics nonetheless. Here's some of the 6 kind of categories of use cases. And companies are getting a lot of value out of this. They're seeing the value. Although it's more, I'll call it tactical as opposed to transformational. And that's kind of part of the overall progression. So KPMG does a number of surveys, and we look at a lot of outside research as well to kind of help us forecast where companies are going to go. We do this one called the CEO survey. And we ask them, what do you think of AI? How relevant is it? And they tell us overwhelmingly that it's going to drive the competitive ability that they need. They're totally bought into it. But then they tell us they've been investing in it and they're not seeing ROI, or they're not seeing as much ROI as they want. But then they come back and say, but we're going to keep investing. So what that tells me is there's a great deal of promise, but they're not really far enough along to say we're getting the benefit that we need, even though we see some of these good use cases delivering the ROI. We ask that same question to CIOs, and we get a similar answer. So it's a little nuanced. Is 89% tell us that they're using machine learning in their organization. You could parse that out. People refer to a lot of things as machine learning. But then they say that 40% tell us that they're just in the research and planning stage of this. And that's kind of consistent with what we see. A lot of companies, they're kind of stuck in these early stages. They've experimented, they think it's cool, but they don't exactly know where they're going to take it. And only 3% say they're using this machine learning across the organization as opposed to in very specific tactical areas. So at KPMG, we kind of see this standard progression from where companies start to get to where they really see the lasting value. And the first phase that companies typically go through, it's a small amount, maybe 15% or less at this point. We kind of call it the experiment and POC kind of territory. They know it's important. They hire some data scientists. They work on some stuff, but they're really not seeing anything beyond that. And for a lot of reasons, they might be stuck there, okay? And we'll talk about the reasons that companies tend to get stuck in a few minutes. About half are in this stage we call repeatable value, is they've done the use cases, they see the value, they're actually using it in their operations. Maybe it's predictive insights, maybe it's some automation, but something like that. About a quarter is kind of made the jump. It's integrated with operations. It really is embedded. They've systematized it so that it's AI or advanced analytics is kind of business as usual, as opposed to something that operates by these smart guys over in the corner. And then probably less than 10% are fully using it to either transform a business process or even transform their entire business model. So here's kind of our current state of where we see our clients, but they're all at it and they're making progress. So let's just talk for a minute about a few characteristics that make some companies more successful. And one is what we call the human element, which is kind of an interesting thing when AI and technology is all kind of about augmenting or even replacing humans, that it's so important. But kind of a couple sides of this. One is the customer side, is companies that use these customer-focused use cases up front tend to be more successful in showing success. I think because it's very understandable. If you engage a customer with a better personalization, better user experience, they're going to buy more stuff. So they tend to see a lot of success from these things. And then the other side of this is also kind of the human basis, which is the workforce empowered. Companies that don't kind of do this in a secretive way, but really bring their people into it and say, look, you're part of this. You need to use the system, you need to contribute to them. They have greater success as well. AI needs to be trusted. Okay, this is a big topic these days because without trust, it's going to hit a roadblock, either within the organization or the board of directors or society at large. And I think some companies have kind of gone down this path with this kind of mystery, and it doesn't work so well. It's about ethics. It's about explainable AI. It's about kind of being open so you can inspire trust and confidence. In interesting TED Talk, Joy Butamwini is reflecting upon some facial recognition software that she's come in contact with that can detect everybody's face, but it can't detect her face. Apparently, the training data didn't include any black faces, and consequently, it doesn't work. And I think it's a good example of a model is only as good as the data you put into it. And it's also this idea that, if it's out there, it must be right, and it's not. And things like that diminish people's trust in AI. In fact, another survey said 70% of CEOs are mistrustful of AI. And that's a big problem, because if you can't trust it, you're probably not going to want to take the step and make it a core part of what you do. Workforce. Obviously, the workforce needs to be transformed. Leading CEOs are upfront about this, and they're not kind of in denial. I think this can be beneficial to do right up front. It's new jobs, new skills. It's about AI ownership for the operating model. Probably most importantly, it's about an AI culture and realizing that AI culture can be inclusive. If you're an early mover, you're going to expand your business, which means plenty of jobs for everybody. But I think companies do best when they're very transparent about the whole impact on the workforce and they get ahead of the curve. And then lastly, we need to talk about the data, but maybe a little bit different angle than we usually talk about. We usually talk about the supply of data, okay? Is it internal data? Is it structured? Is it unstructured? What about external data? Are you good at using unstructured data? Can you bring it all together? And the answer is yes, that's important. And a lot of companies are, I won't say they're mastering it, but they're kind of moving up the curve. I think the other issue that the big enterprises are dealing with now is more the demand for data, okay? Is that how many people actually understand what the data can be used for? If you think about the road to adopt AI as being a journey, I think it's a journey. I don't think it's one of these things where you put it in place, you spend a couple years, it's done, and you move on. I mean, this is going to be a journey throughout, it's probably forever. And if you embark on a journey, you want as many people as you can contributing to the thought process and the ideas and the inspiration behind it, and not just that group of people over there in the corner that figures everything out. And there's a concept called data literacy that's kind of sweeping the enterprise right now. And it really means that everybody understands what the data is, but what you can do with it. And in my mind, this is about driving a data-driven culture versus a process-oriented culture. So anyway, those are kind of a few features of what we consider the AI-driven organization. But let me close by giving a few thoughts. And first thought is AI in the enterprise is alive and well. I'm not expecting any more AI winters because I think this has really had a great head of steam, and the investment's only going to accelerate. But I think it's wrong to just think about it as technology. Build the technology and we will come. At its core, it's about the transformation of human beings, okay? And this means great change and also change management required. And then if you think about the leaders of the future are going to be the ones who can effectively coordinate the humans and the machines to work together in a complementary fashion. But anyway, those are my opening remarks. So with that, let me turn it over to Tracy, and she can delve into a few of these topics in greater detail. Thank you.